Welcome to today's video, in which we shall be talking about someone who made a very significant mark on the history of Africa. Indian lawyer and political ethicist Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, popularly known as Mahatma Gandhi, led the campaign for India's liberation from British rule and later inspired movements for civil rights and freedom in Africa and across the world. The Indian word Mahatma simply means great soul. Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869 in Porbandar, India, and died on January 30, 1948 at the age of 78. Gandhi joined the bar in 1891 at the age of 22, and 2 years later, he moved to South Africa to represent an Indian merchant in a lawsuit. He lived and carried out many activities in South Africa for over 21 years. African history has made us understand that, during his stay in South Africa, Gandhi expressed disdain for Africans. There is a book published by Anand titled The South African Gandhi, Stretcher Bearer of Empire, which clearly indicates how Gandhi described black Africans as savage, raw, and living a life of indolence and nakedness. During his time, Gandhi campaigned relentlessly to prove to the British rulers that the Indian community in South Africa was superior to the native black Africans. Just make sure you are comfortable enough to watch what we've got for you in this video. Remember to subscribe to the New Tourist channel if you haven't done that yet, and turn on the notification button so that you do not miss any of our content. Amongst the political strategies used by Gandhi during his stay in Africa was one in which he carved out an exclusivist Indian identity that relied on him taking up Indian issues in ways that cut them off from Africans. His attitudes were likened to those of whites in the early years. South African academics Ashwin Desai and Ghulam Vahidi spent 7 years exploring the complex story of a man who lived in their country for more than 2 decades and campaigned for the rights of Indian people there. Better known as the Mahatma or Great Soul, Gandhi was an Indian lawyer who led his country to freedom from British colonial rule in 1947. He was assassinated months later at the age of 78. The question many people often ask is whether Mahatma Gandhi had any racial attributes. Research has shown that Mahatma Gandhi was an anti-colonial protester, religious thinker, pragmatist, and radical who effectively used nonviolence to fight for many causes during his leading ministry. Nelson Mandela once said that the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi helped to topple apartheid in South Africa. The Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie was also one of Gandhi's admirers, but at one point he said, "Gandhi will always be remembered as long as free men, and those who love freedom and justice live." This shows that not all Africans were inspired by the man known as the Father of India. Ghana's problem with racist Gandhi. Many years back, an online petition to wipe out Gandhi's legacy in Ghana was signed by more than 1,000 people. This began amongst professors at the University of Ghana, who called for the removal of Gandhi's statues from campus grounds in Accra. The academics said that Gandhi, who was praised by public figures for leading India's nonviolent movement to freedom from British colonial rule during the mid-20th century, had a racist identity. The petition lists quotes from the writings of the Indian leader, in which he described Africans as savages, or the natives of Africa, and Kafirs, which is a racial slur for a black African. Gandhi in South Africa. In 1893, 23-year-old Gandhi arrived in Durban. He was enrolled as a barrister at the Inner Temple in London, but he failed in his profession in India. He only excelled in drafting petitions and memoranda. Merchants in Durban offered him a 1-year job to assist his lawyer in a litigation. This consisted mainly of translating accounts written in Gujarati to English. Even though the salary was mere £100 per year, Gandhi accepted the offer in the hope of finding better opportunities in South Africa. During one of his speeches in 1937, he said, "At school, the teachers did not consider me a very bright boy. They knew that I was a good boy, but not a bright boy. I never knew first class and second class. I barely passed. I was a dull boy. I could not even speak properly. Even when I went to South Africa, I went only as a clerk." After the year was over, Gandhi managed to get an assignment from the merchants in Durban to advise and assist them on dealing with the actions of the natal government and the local authorities against them. They offered £300 a year in retainers. The immediate issue was the proposal to remove the voting rights of a few rich Indians who had them. The class and color prejudices of Gandhi, carried from India, were reinforced by those of the merchants and the white officers he dealt with. In countering the arguments of the white racists, Gandhi tried to show that Indians were different from Africans. He used the language of whites, which was offensive to Africans, and referred to them as inferior Kafirs. Nelson Mandela was also aware of the racist statements made by Gandhi when he was young. He wrote in an article in 1995 saying, "Gandhi must be forgiven those prejudices and judged in the context of time and circumstances. We are looking here at the young Gandhi, still to become Mahatma, when he was without any human prejudice, save that in favor of truth and justice." The term Kafir was not considered offensive at that time in South Africa, as it became years later. It was widely used, for example, Kafir Express for the train and Kafir corn for the grain. The educated Christian Africans, who were popularly known as Kolwa, sometimes called the illiterate Africans. Yet it is surprising that Gandhi used that term. He must have known how the term Kafir, meaning infidel, was a derogatory term used by Muslims against Hindus in India. Gandhi did not understand the sensitivity of Africans. From today's perspectives, some of his statements in the first 2 years of his employment are unpardonable and very un-Gandhian. We can also find another bum trip in the letter written by Gandhi to the Natal Parliament of South Africa in 1893. It said that a general belief seemed to prevail in the colony, that the Indians were a little better, if at all, than the savages or the natives of Africa. In 1904, Gandhi wrote to a health official in Johannesburg that the council must withdraw Kafirs from an unsanitary slum called the Coolie location that was cohabited by many Africans and Indians. He went as far as confessing that he was sorry for making the two parties live together. This was a sign of racial segregation for the people under his rule at the time. Still in 1904, Gandhi wrote that, unlike Africans, Indians had no war dances nor local drinks, and this was another big blow to Africans. When Durban was hit by a plague in 1905, Gandhi wrote that the problem would persist as long as Indians and Africans were being herded together indiscriminately at the hospital. Some South Africans have always accused the man who led India to independence of working with the British colonial government to promote racial segregation. Gandhi's biographer and grandson, Rajmohan Gandhi, wrote that his grandfather struggled for Indian rights in South Africa and ignited the struggle for black rights, though with imperfections like any other human being could do. However, Gandhi was more radical and progressive than most contemporary compatriots. One other important thing to take note of is the fact that Gandhi believed in the Aryan Brotherhood, which involved whites and Indians higher up than Africans on the civilization scale. This played as a major factor for him to often look down on the African race. More than a century after Gandhi left Africa, there has been a resurrection. Despite their reservations about the empire, Desai and Vahidi acknowledged that Gandhi raised universal demands for equality and dignity. But even the greatest men are flawed, and Gandhi was possibly no exception. Gandhi, as a young man, went with the ideas of his culture and his time. He thought in his 20s that Europeans were the most civilized. To him, Indians were also as civilized, and the Africans were not. He outgrew his racism quite decisively, and for most of his life as a public figure, he was an anti-racist, taking for an end to discrimination of all kinds. Protests staged against racist Gandhi. In 2018, activists in Malawi went protesting the construction of a statue of India's independence leader Mahatma Gandhi in Blantyre. According to them, the statue, which was erected as part of a deal for India to construct a $10 million convention center, was an insult to Malawians and Africa because of racial slurs Gandhi made as a young man. An online campaign in Malawi collected nearly 4,000 signatures against erecting the statue. It is indeed true that Gandhi uttered racist remarks against native Africans within the dominant discourse on race and culture of the time. The Ghana University petition cites 6 racist utterances by Gandhi against indigenous Africans between 1894 and 1906, most of which have already been seen. You should also retain that, with time, Gandhi's views about the people of Africa changed. If Gandhi is castigated for his racist utterances, aren't his revised opinions on native Africans equally noteworthy? Some scholars like Joseph Lelyveld and Arundhati Roy have suggested that Gandhi's change of mind may not have been a genuine one. To them, later utterances about native Africans made in the 1930s were intended at tidying up his disdain for the blacks. Any reasonable analysis would have to conclude that, until around the early or mid-1910s, Gandhi was decidedly a racist, and throughout this period, his sense of solidarity was more with the white colonizers than with the natives. By 1928, the narrative of Satyagraha in South Africa casted Gandhi's solidarities strongly with the Zulus. His autobiography, written during the same period, talks of the so-called uncivilized Zulus. His reflections in 1939 reveal the further erosion of civilizational racism. Human rights claims are based on the assumption that all humans share a certain equality as other humans. You have heard some of the things that transpired at the time, when Mahatma Gandhi acted as political leader Africa. It is interesting to note that all those moments passed without any major wars, so the main lesson we grasp from this video is that of nonviolence when we want to achieve something. Mahatma Gandhi actually fought for India's freedom and inspired the struggle against colonialism in Africa as well. He also campaigned to uplift the downtrodden and more. Although Gandhi acted in ways that weren't totally favorable to Africans, his memories are quite useful for Africans. Please make sure you hit the like button and share this video massively to your family and friends, and also do well to subscribe to the New Tourist channel for more interesting and life-changing videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.